Hello and welcome to Finding Joy. I have a special guest, Kerrie Alanen, today. Kerrie is a leadership coach and consultant, and I'm excited to have you here, Kerrie. Kerrie and I have known each other for a number of years, and Kerrie has a unique story. And so I am delighted to have you here, Kerrie, and to talk about what has built a good life for you, some of the things that you've been through that have helped you understand more deeply around what really matters to you and what's important. And so I look forward to this conversation.
Me too. Thank you, Leona. This brings me joy doing this with you.
Thank you. Me too. Me too. So on Finding Joy, we look at what creates a meaningful life. And I'd love to understand a little bit about you, where you began your journey professionally. You have kind of an interesting twist or turn or pirouette, perhaps, in your life. And so if you could just share a little bit about that, and then we'll talk more about what it is that has helped you create a meaningful life.
Awesome. I'd love to. I started my working career as a ballerina with the Royal Winnipeg Ballet, and I guess it was a weird, unusual twist and a pirouette for sure. It was really fun. It was really enjoyable. It brought me a lot of joy. And as Leona and I were preparing, some of the questions you asked were really neat because it made me think about what was the joy in that career. And I realized there's this thread a little bit on the other end of the spectrum of work life now, on the experienced end. I realized that even the jobs that were not perhaps joyful because of corporate culture or working culture or how I was being treated, if the work is meaningful, there's always joy at work. I really enjoyed that work. It was a really interesting time to be an artist and to wear tiaras and tutus and flit around the stage, and the true gift of traveling internationally, all those things, working in a team, all those things. Good stuff. Lots of good stuff. But of course, with that came injury. So I hurt my hip and I didn't listen to my body. It's one of the things I regret, but I've learned from, is that I didn't listen to my body and I hurt myself. And I kept working, and then I needed a hip replacement on my right hip, which at the time in my young life was devastating, but it really was a good thing. It got me completely out of that world. I was able to retrain. I'm Leona. I went into a business career, got my bachelor's of commerce and a number of other designations that I worked through. Also, Leona helped me shape my values, my purpose. And decades later, I'm here as a leadership advisor and trying to do the good work of keeping myself in a place where I'm enjoying what I do so I can hopefully do that for others. I guess that's what I would say.
So I'd love to hear when you were a young ballerina, and I didn't know if we still called them ballerina or do they all get called generic ballet dancers. So I'm just going to take your cue. And then if I'm doing something wrong, then I heard it from you. So I'm curious how you defined success and a good life then, and how that might have changed over the years. I guess the story I make up is I'm like, wow, like ballerina, you were a principal ballerina, which for those of you who don't know means that they are the ones that is like the captain of the football team. They are the ones that you would see on the stage doing more of the solos, duets. So very, very top of your game, top of your career at that point. And so my story would be like, you want to be the best ballerina, and what does that look like? Or has there been a thread of what creates a meaningful life? How do you define success that's always been the same?
I ended my career as a soloist doing principal roles. So just to clarify that, because I have to.
For the person who just like owns a pair of ballet slippers to walk around their house and pretend.
You know what? And I call us ballerinas. I don't think it's funny because I work in, diversity and inclusion and those kinds of things. And I think people don't like the term ballerina because it should be, more inclusive. But I still call myself a ballerina because in my head, I'm still like a little flitty ballerina. So flitty meaning loving what I do. So I think we're going to say that. And if we get in trouble, I'll own it. We'll own it. But I think the thing that I realize as I look back, I loved, dancing like I was in my living room with nobody watching. From the time I was 3 and still, my entire life. And that was what my career was. So that joy spot was always there. However, there wasn't always self-care and wellness to my core, taking care of my little self, my little Kerrie. I didn't always do that. I got a little off kilter being a high performance person, I think is what I'll call it, at a young age, having to have all the things right, being a good little girl, all the good marks, good little ballerina, goes into control when it gets off kilter, eating disorder, got to control what I eat. I could control that. I couldn't control an uncertain world or my emotions, but I could control that. And then, of course, this dichotomy that I think all athletes experience is how far will I go for my craft? How far will I go to achieve my goal? And most athletes will tell you they'll go all the way. Not cool, very hard to understand. As a parent now with high performance athletes, I'm like, uh, when they'll go all like, when they don't tell you when they're not well, when they're hurting, when they're sick, when they're injured, they push through all the things. So I don't know that piece. I still struggle with, but definitely self-care at this end of things. And if I would have listened to the psychologists and the dietitians and the physiotherapists and all the people throughout my career that said, take this show off, rest, or don't do this role, there'll be other roles. And you're like, no, I got to do it, or I'm not going to be whatever. And then, of course, taking care of my body as a human being, those things. I wish I would have done a little bit better. Maybe I wouldn't have gotten as injured. Maybe I would have had my goals actualized sooner as a ballerina because my body wore out, but my career was at the peak. Or maybe the true gift of having, coming back to Alberta, being in a province that does the best hip and knee replacements in the country, getting this best hip. I have the same hip that Bo Jackson has, and he went back to play baseball. So
Wow.
I had 2 babies after my hip, and I still exercise. I can't run or jump, but I just still do my things. And so, yeah, but the true lesson was self-care. So the hip was a gift in that regard.
I want to pull the thread a little bit about the hip being a gift, because what I see so often is that people that can create the best lives don't necessarily weren't born with all the silver spoons. And that's what made me think of you as being such an amazing guest, because nobody handed you this second career. Nobody, you had this abrupt, devastating stop to your career. And yet you can see that as a gift. And when we look at the research around people that are resilient, the people that do create meaningful lives, they are the ones that, despite terrible setbacks, are the ones that create meaning out of that and can look at it as a gift. And so when you think about maybe that situation with your hip and perhaps other clarifying situations in your life, some big changes, what are the things that in those big moments of change, even in your career, or maybe even having kids or starting out your own leadership coaching and development organization, what are some of the things that have become very clear to you around what matters to you, what creates a good life for you?
Excellent question. And at first my brain went to I was very fortunate to have parents that were working class, principals of schools, scraped the big bucks to send me to train at the Roman Peg Ballet. But you went to the resilience of the injury. So it's but what's interesting there is that I was very fortunate, incredibly fortunate. And so now I navigate that. And I'm always impressed by people that truly didn't have any of, and is it good fortune? I don't know, but didn't have that, or the kids that don't have the bucks to do extracurricular activities, or like even join school basketball, which is it's still $250. Like if you got a couple kids, so I was very fortunate. And what I think created more hardship for me is being such an entitled kid and then having that carpet pulled out. But yeah, I was really rocked to the core because I really saw myself as a ballerina from the time I was very young. And that lots of people understood what I was going through. And as you've experienced it, hardship and sorrow at a young age, big stuff. You're more so than mine, if anyone knows Leona's story. But mine was, losing a career as a ballerina in my little world. It was devastating. And yet I think it helped to have the people around me that were like, you've had all that. Like, come on, kid. Like, you had all that. So to answer the question, I guess I think I realize now that that study that's in Brene Brown's work where they realized and not comparing anything about my life to a prison camp or something, but of course I can't relate to that. But it was the people that had hope more than the rose-colored glasses people that kind of were able to maintain the humanity and make it through. And that's really neat. I think that like hope, I think brings you to your joy. It reprogrammed your brain towards seeing like, yeah, like we've won the lottery by being Canadian. We're so lucky to be in this country and then to all the things I had. So, but you don't see that as a young human. Not young, I was probably early 30s when I got my hip replacement. So it took I think it took time for me to see the gifts, but now I see them more quickly. When I started working, I remember in human resources hearing people say this question, really great question to ask when you're getting to know people. Like, what is something that you really had to go through as a human being where you almost lost your humanity, almost thought you're at that breaking point, but you pulled through? What did you learn from it? What was the experience? And I like that question, and even how people answer it, I can understand if they're like, yep, and I think I know what your one of your stories may be, and one of mine would be my hip, even though it was my hip. It wasn't like I didn't. And there's lots of stories of losing humans and those things, but those stories that really make you realize, like, wow, all I have to live for. And this is just something that gives me data to work with about myself to move forward. Not easy to do in the moment, but I think that is what I've learned that.
Yeah. I'm hearing a few things. The way that you connect to the social support that you have, that's so important when we think about creating resilience, living a good life. Lonely people are not nearly, they just don't have the same resources. And you recognizing, hey, like I had these people that were supporting me, helping me. The other thing I hear is that Brene talks about the most resilient people piss and moan with perspective. That yes, this sucked, but I got to do this, and so it's not that we can't have that face down view of reality and go, yeah, this is hard. What do I do now? I've given so much to be here. And now what? The other thing I hear in you, and maybe it's like a shared value, and I'd like to know a little bit more about your values in a moment, but your parents, you said, were both in education. Is that right?
Yes.
Because one of the ways that we create meaning after something hard happens is by what we learn about it. And it sounds like you have such a vast grasp on what you learned about what mattered. You talked about, I didn't take the advice of, some of the people that said, hey, take this show off. I didn't, listen to self-care. I did things that were damaging to my body and things around control, which, we all are on a bit of a spectrum around what can we control? How do we do these things? So it sounds like you've taken a lot of the things that it sounds like you come by almost naturally, like, oh, well, but it's not. But those pieces are so important. And the fact that you can find something to be grateful for, which I think even coming back to joy is, yeah, even in a little tiny moment going, oh, that, I have the best hip replacement. I had access to good health care. I had, parents that supported me. Those things help keep things in perspective, which going back to the concentration, or no, the POW camp people that Brene talks about around resilience, right? Was like, they call them optimistically realists, or realistically optimistic. So yes, this is the face down view of reality. This is hard and I have to change my career. And what am I going to do about it? So we're not saying I'm going to get back up after I get my hip replaced and doing something unrealistic, just like POW camp. People can't wish their way out of a POW camp. And it sounds like you did the same, that you're just like, okay, now what? And you did what you could with the resources you had, the capacity to go back to school. So, yeah, just all these things woven in there. I'm curious whether it's from these experience or just overall. Part of when we talk about finding joy, I use the acronym Just Own You. And it's really about being authentic and genuine. And you, Kerrie, have a real, I think, have a real strong sense of like who you are and what matters to you. And I'm curious what you've learned over your life about what it means to be more genuine, more authentic, and how you stay connected to that.
Good question. And I think we could share some stories. And you've helped me, Leona, truly embrace that side of me. And it's at this stage of the game, it's become, I really enjoy standing in and promoting. And I realize, however, that it isn't always comfortable for people to be around. So, in all honesty, at this age, this age and stage, I find myself really enjoying showing up as my wacky, weird, and wonderful self and being the person and I'm not diagnosed ADHD, but so many of us are talking about these things since COVID. And I definitely think there's some attention deficit, or I get bored doing certain things, right? So on those really long board meetings, might be the one like putting on like black teeth or wearing weird glasses and, or showing up to a board meeting like a Hanson brother and everyone's in suits. I tend to do those kinds of things. And some people really like that, some people don't. So I think at this stage, really, I know that I have to embrace that side of me to have fun. There's that weird, quirky, fun side of me. However, I really value connection. And we were talking about this before, like I really notice, I sense it, my intuition, I get it right away when people are not digging how I may show up. So I'm really aware of that at this stage of the game in business. However, I know that I'm definitely drawn to clients, and I think I serve clients a little bit better if they want to do the same for themselves and kind of dance in that place where they are just really relaxed and authentic. And I think if that answers the question, I'm much more comfortable being myself, and that perhaps is why I've ended up in private practice, not working in a massive corporate culture where where I maybe have to tone down some things. I like, and I think, in all honesty, I think I show up and I have more faculty to bring to situations if I'm myself. And we know from psychological safety research that if we can do that for people, if there's no human cost to showing up and being yourself, you don't have to change to fit into the crew. We know that your blood pressure goes down. Your IQ actually goes up in the moment if tested. You likely will make less mistakes, all that good stuff. So it's kind of supporting the weird and wonderful beings we are. And I like that. I like that I can be not unapologetic, because I'm still apologetic sometimes, most definitely, because it comes out, But I would say that's the biggest thing I've learned. And working in corporate situations helped me identify that, being able to realize, like, I'm not like the other kids in this moment. And I can certainly stay, absolutely. Or maybe I need to figure out the kind of kid I want to be. And every day when I get up, and I think that's been the theme that kind of walked me through kind of dancing in my own authentic style. It's not for everyone.
No, not, and we don't need to be for everyone. That's hard for us. But in our little kind of pre-show chat, we talked about how you are very aware of your values, very in alignment. And when we look at the kind of the basis of flourishing and living a fulfilling life and thriving instead of surviving, which I think you were such an incredible example of. Tell me a little bit about how you know you're living into your values. How does that play a role in you being genuine, authentic, and being the perhaps weird and wonderful dancer, metaphorically, as you are, whether it was in a boardroom or previously on a stage?
I think currently, and these are very broad, so clearly I have work to do, probably with Leona, but on my top value is respect and equality. And then my second is courage. So it has to be checked. As a parent, it's come up because I want, any parent and any human, I think, that has siblings or nieces or nephews, or any parent knows what it's like when your human is being wronged, or you perceive them to be not being treated equally, or you see something that could be improved upon. So I find it really hard at times to navigate that as a parent. And in my career, I got to a place where I was able to champion myself if I wasn't being treated with respect or equally. I've learned throughout my life that I must find an equilibrium with that or I will be tricky. I'm a tricky person when when there's injustice going on around me. And it's not always pretty because I also really am quite a courageous communicator. So you can see how, as a mama bear, there's been times where it hasn't been pretty. But I have to say, as I get older, I feel the hot stove quicker. I would say that I've had to navigate my values. And the older I get, I understand when I'll be able to represent those values in a positive way, but can really get me into trouble. But I usually never regret the message. Regret the delivery. And I don't think there's been anything that I've stood up for or felt like I was courageous about that I regret in theory, but perhaps in process. And that's why it's good to talk about my values a lot and understand that work that Brene Brown does around like how I'll show up or good, bad, or ugly, but I will. I will. You will know. And I think that's embracing that humanity.
And I really appreciate that piece of going, this is me. And when we live into our values, sometimes when they are violated, we do get a little spicy. And it's our work to acknowledge, oh, hey, oops. Yeah, I didn't intend perhaps to communicate that way, but in the same way, we can still be unapologetic, or we can still be, sometimes we have to apologize for things, but we can still own who we are unapologetically. Like, this is who I am. Oops, maybe I wish I communicated that better. Apologize, amends. I'm working on it. And I love what you said about, I notice when I'm closer to the stove, I'm learning the same thing. Is there anything that you do, and it doesn't necessarily be on a daily basis, but I think that intentional living our best lives, being most genuine, my experience is that people, either they have specific practices, it may not be a daily practice, but a lot of them do, so that they can be grounded, they can be centered, so we're not bumping into the hot stove extra often. We can still be beautifully human and imperfect, but there are some grounding practices. So do you have anything that you engage in that you have found has been helpful for you to really stay true to yourself and feel like you're living a life in alignment with what matters to you?
I would say many. And I think, a lot of it stems back to just little micro traumas in our lives. In my life, for certain, where I just put a lot of pressure on myself, or maybe there was some external pressures to be something. And so I lived in that anxiety pocket for a while. And I think it created patterns in me that were not healthy. And you really learn a lot being a parent and then seeing my boys do some of the things, the weird things and then going, whoa, that's not healthy. So I've learned a lot, obviously, in the past couple of decades. I would say one of the things I stopped 2.5 years ago was alcohol completely. Because just for me, I realized that the teenage boys, if it got tricky, I'd have a glass of wine or two. And even a glass of wine or two, I was definitely numbing. And then I was numbing. I wasn't parenting. I was just like, okay, mommy's got a little wine glass buzz here. So that was just happening a little too often for me. So no alcohol for me just helps me. Also predisposed perhaps to dementia and Alzheimer's. So I know that that helps. And then the other thing is I do meditation. I've tried all different kinds. And this is interesting. Meditation is just like sitting with your eyes closed, either being in a guided sitting, someone talking on a little app, or just sitting. So it's not, I didn't realize that. I thought it was like a big, difficult practice, but it's just sitting. Kind of like hiking is just walking, right? So it's very simple. So I do a lot of sitting and walking, which is meditation and hiking. I do a lot of that. And it really does determine my day. If I do my practice, I know, like, I don't come out of my room in the morning and get angry with my dog or my husband or my teenage boys. I'm able to like be there and be clear and present. I'm a wellness geek now, and I love finding new ways to be chill. It's just decadent and great. And so anything I can do, a lot of breathing, and my teenage boys are always like, I'm like, okay, let's do our breathing. We do our physiological Andrew Huberman breathing all the time. We're always breathing. We're doing something, and you know what? They're using some of it in there. One of them has state dependent. I can't remember what it is, where he gets really, really worried about tests. So he's actually practicing some of these things before he writes his exam. Things like that. But it really helps, and it really is for me understanding that moment when I'm like, whoa, I don't feel good right now. I have like a vice script in my head. I have anxiety. I feel yuck. And I notice it in my digestion. I notice it in my sleeping. I would say all those things. It's constant work though, isn't it, Leona?
Yes, it is work. Yeah. Yeah. It definitely is. But that intentional living is just so valuable. Yeah. So I love how that arc has kind of gone from these places where you've had a big change, what you've learned, how you understand who you are, what matters, your values. You don't have to be perfect to be enough. We can still be feisty when somebody steps on something and then come back around, step back into integrity. What does that look like? I'm curious just of the basis of joy, the emotion of joy. I always end the podcast with what has been bringing you joy lately. So would you share what has been bringing you joy lately?
Hugging my big, huge, hairy teenage boys and knowing that they enjoy it too. We're huggers. So that feeling, whatever that is, and just dialing it back. I am grateful for COVID because my kids love being at home. They love just having a movie night. They like cooking. So all of those moments, truly when I'm the happiest. Just, and
Joy spots.
yeah, that's it. Just whatever that feeling is. Is that love or joy? Love and joy. I don't know.
I think joy is often the emotion that we get as like when I think, okay, love, then I get this like backdraft of joy. I think, I experience like deep contentment. There's often this like, it's like joy is like the top layer on top of some of these other emotions that we seek so often. And by enjoying the love and then enjoying the joy, we savor the good and we create greater capacity for experiencing an even deeper amount of those emotions. If you had 1 minute to tell, or 1 minute or one sentence to give your own philosophy or your little TED talk on what it is, what you would tell people about what it takes to create a meaningful life or the best life, what would you say?
A couple of things. First of all, I'd say through a kind and empathetic practice, be unapologetically you. And the other thing I can say is I now know that's backed by science, that if we do that at the cellular level, you're healthier. And we know that by doing that, you rewire your brain, and the neuroplasticity in your brain will put fires together, wires together. So it gives you lifelong health and wellness and true deep rooted joy. That's what I've learned.
So good, Kerrie. I'm coming to your 20-minute TED talk just to be extra filled up. And on that note, Kerrie and I will be back for our second episode when we're both 90 and cognitively, majorly intact because we will be having lived an authentic life. We know the art of resilience and we know how to spice things up even on the cellular level. So thank you, Kerrie. Kerrie, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for being a guest and taking the time out. Kerrie is a coach and a leadership consultant. She does HR work. She works in psychological safety, coaching, leadership training, and development, amongst other things. She works with her company, Resolute Consulting. Is that right, Kerrie?
Yeah.
I knew it was Resolute, so I'm just winging it on the consulting, and is also getting her doctorate in the neuroscience of leadership. So Kerrie is a fellow nerd that I love, that is doing hard and brave things. And I will put all of our contact information in the show notes. Thank you again, Kerrie, for being a guest. Such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. It was a true honor. Thank you, Leona.